Right now, somewhere in your garage, your backyard, or your basement, something is happening that is costing you money every single year without you even noticing it. Metal is rusting. Your tools, your fence, your gate, your car, the brackets holding your gutters, the hinges on your shed door, the railing on your porch steps, all of it, slowly, continuously being consumed by oxidation, while the coatings industry sells you another can of paint that will need to be reapplied in 2 or 3 years, and another after that, and another after that, in a cycle that never ends because it was never designed to end. But there is a solution that ends the cycle completely. It doesn't cover rust, it doesn't slow rust, it chemically transforms rust into a permanent protective layer that bonds to the metal at a molecular level and stays there indefinitely. It has been known since the 19th century. It was used by the United States military to protect ships, weapons, and vehicles during World War II. It costs a few dollars per application, and your local hardware store almost certainly doesn't stock it in the form that works best, because if it did, you would never need to buy rust treatment again. That is exactly the problem. Before we get to the solution, you need to understand what rust actually is at a chemical level, because that understanding is what makes the solution so obvious once you see it. Rust is iron oxide. When iron or steel is exposed to oxygen and moisture, a chemical reaction occurs. The iron atoms on the surface bond with oxygen to form iron oxide, the reddish-brown flaking compound that we call rust. This process is continuous and self-reinforcing. Once rust forms on a surface, it creates a porous, uneven texture that traps moisture and accelerates further oxidation beneath it. Left untreated, rust works its way deeper into the metal, weakening it structurally until it fails entirely. The coatings industry's answer to this problem is paint, specifically paint applied over the rusted surface to create a barrier between the metal and the oxygen and moisture that cause further oxidation. This approach works for a while. As long as the paint film remains intact, it blocks the oxidation reaction. But paint doesn't remain intact indefinitely. It chips, it peels, it cracks at joints and edges. Moisture works its way under the film. And when it does, oxidation resumes beneath the paint where you can't see it, often progressing faster than it would on bare metal because the trapped moisture has nowhere to evaporate. So you repaint, and the cycle continues. The industry has refined this model into an art form: rust converters that chemically stabilize the surface before painting, primers formulated for adhesion to oxidized metal, top coats with enhanced flexibility to resist cracking. Each product has a role, each role generates revenue, and the fundamental problem that paint eventually fails and rust eventually returns ensures that the revenue never stops. This is not a malfunction of the system. This is the system functioning exactly as designed. The chemical secret they've known since 1869. In 1869, a chemist filed a patent for a process that would eventually change how militaries around the world protected their metal equipment. The process was called phosphating. The active ingredient was phosphoric acid. Here is what phosphoric acid does to rust that no paint in the world can replicate. When phosphoric acid comes in contact with iron oxide, a chemical reaction occurs. The acid reacts with the rust to form iron phosphate. Iron phosphate is not rust. It is a completely different compound, hard, stable, tightly bonded to the underlying metal, and highly resistant to further oxidation. Where rust is porous and crumbling, iron phosphate is dense and adhered. Where rust invites more moisture, iron phosphate repels it. The phosphating process doesn't remove the rust, it converts it. Every molecule of iron oxide on the surface becomes iron phosphate. The treatment penetrates into the rust layer rather than sitting on top of it, converting the problem into the solution at a molecular level. The resulting iron phosphate layer serves two purposes simultaneously. It eliminates the existing rust by transforming it into a stable compound, and it creates a surface that is significantly more resistant to future oxidation than bare metal, because the phosphate layer itself acts as a barrier against the oxygen and moisture that cause rust to form. One application, permanent transformation, no repainting cycle required. How the military figured it out and then kept it quiet. The United States military in the 1930s and 1940s faced a rust problem on a scale that no civilian has ever had to deal with. Thousands of ships, tens of thousands of vehicles, hundreds of thousands of weapons, all of them made of steel, all of them exposed to the most corrosive environments on Earth: saltwater, tropical humidity, Arctic cold, desert heat. The paint-based approach that worked adequately in peacetime conditions was failing under the demands of wartime. Ships at sea couldn't be dry-docked for repainting every 2 years. Vehicles in the Pacific Theater were rusting faster than maintenance crews could keep up with. Weapons stored in jungle conditions were seizing with oxidation. The military turned to phosphating, and specifically to a refinement of the process called parkerizing, which used manganese phosphate or zinc phosphate instead of pure iron phosphate to create an even harder, more corrosion-resistant surface coating. The results were decisive. Parkerized steel resisted corrosion dramatically better than painted steel in field conditions. The treatment penetrated the metal surface rather than sitting on top of it, so it couldn't chip or peel. It bonded permanently at a molecular level. It required no maintenance after application. Ships, tanks, rifles, artillery pieces, all of them treated with phosphating compounds that cost almost nothing per unit and lasted for years in conditions that would have destroyed conventional paint coatings in months. The military didn't keep this secret intentionally. The technology was documented, patented, and available. But after the war, as the coatings industry rebuilt and expanded for the civilian market, phosphating remained primarily an industrial process used in manufacturing rather than a consumer product sold at hardware stores. Why? Because a product that permanently solves a problem is worth selling once. A product that temporarily addresses a problem is worth selling repeatedly for the lifetime of the customer. This is exactly the problem. The ancient knowledge behind the modern chemistry. What makes the phosphating story even more remarkable is that the underlying principle, using acidic compounds to chemically transform metal surfaces and protect them from further corrosion, was not invented in the 19th century, it was rediscovered. Ancient Roman metallurgists working with iron tools and weapons observed that certain acidic substances, including vinegar, urine, and plant-derived acids, when applied to iron surfaces produced a darkened coating that resisted rust better than untreated metal. They didn't understand the chemistry, they didn't know they were creating iron phosphate or related compounds, but they knew it worked, and they used it. Japanese sword makers of the medieval period developed sophisticated surface treatment techniques for their blades that included acidic patination processes producing corrosion-resistant surface layers. The legendary durability of Japanese sword steel is partly the product of the steel's composition, but also partly the product of surface treatment knowledge that Japanese craftsmen developed over centuries of empirical observation. Blacksmiths across Europe and Asia independently developed variations of the same technique, controlled oxidation and acidic treatment to create protective surface coatings on iron and steel tools. Each culture arrived at similar conclusions through different paths because the underlying chemistry was consistent even when the theoretical understanding wasn't. What the 1869 patent and the subsequent military research did was formalize and optimize what artisans had been doing intuitively for thousands of years. The chemistry of phosphoric acid converting iron oxide to iron phosphate is not a modern invention, it is a modern explanation of an ancient observation. The coatings industry didn't suppress ancient knowledge, but it did build a billion-dollar business model on a foundation that required that ancient knowledge to remain inaccessible to the average consumer. What phosphoric acid actually costs? Let's put numbers on this, because the economics are where the story becomes impossible to ignore. A liter of phosphoric acid solution suitable for rust conversion costs between $5 and $15 at agricultural supply stores, chemical suppliers, and some hardware retailers. A single liter is sufficient to treat several square meters of rusted metal surface. For a typical residential application, treating a rusted gate, a set of garden tools, a section of metal fence, or the undercarriage of a vehicle, the total material cost is measured in dollars, not tens or hundreds of dollars.
Compare that to the typical cycle of rust treatment products. A rust converter spray runs $15 to $25 per can. A suitable top coat adds another $15 to $30. Application equipment, brushes, rollers, or spray equipment adds more, and the entire process needs to be repeated every 2 to 5 years as the coating inevitably degrades. Over a 10-year period, the typical approach to treating a rusted metal fence might cost $150 to $300 in materials alone, plus the time of repeated applications. The phosphoric acid approach, applied once properly to convert the existing rust and create a stable iron phosphate base for a single top coat, costs $10 to $20 in acid plus a one-time top coat application. The difference is not marginal. It is the difference between a product designed to be repurchased and a process designed to permanently solve the problem.
Why your hardware store doesn't carry it. Walk into any major hardware chain and look at the rust treatment section. You will find rust converter sprays, rust inhibitor primers, rust encapsulating paints, and rust preventive top coats. You will find products in every price range, from budget options to premium professional-grade formulations. What you will not find, in most cases, is a simple bottle of phosphoric acid solution with clear instructions for rust conversion. Not because it doesn't exist, not because it doesn't work, but because it doesn't fit the retail model that the coatings industry has built. Phosphoric acid is classified as a chemical rather than a coating product. It requires different handling instructions, different safety labeling, and different retail shelf positioning than a paint or primer. These are not insurmountable obstacles. They are inconveniences that nobody in the industry has a financial incentive to overcome, because overcoming them would mean making available a product that competes with an entire category of higher-margin repeat purchase items. The product exists. Agricultural suppliers carry phosphoric acid for soil pH adjustment. Metal finishing suppliers carry it in industrial surface preparation. Chemical suppliers carry it in various concentrations. The information on how to use it for rust conversion is documented in military specifications, industrial standards, and metallurgy literature going back over a century. It was never hidden in a vault. It was just never placed on the shelf next to the rust paint because the people who control that shelf had no reason to put it there. How to use it. The application process is straightforward enough that anyone comfortable with basic safety precautions can do it. Phosphoric acid should be handled with gloves and eye protection. It is a mild acid by chemical standards, weaker than the acid in a car battery, but it will irritate skin and eyes on contact and should be treated with appropriate respect. Clean the rusted surface of loose debris, dirt, and flaking rust with a wire brush or coarse sandpaper. You don't need to remove all the rust, the acid will convert what remains, but removing loose material improves the result. Apply the phosphoric acid solution liberally to the rusted surface using a brush, sponge, or spray. Allow it to react for 30 minutes to several hours depending on the severity of the rust and the concentration of the solution. The surface will change color as the conversion occurs, typically darkening to a gray or black iron phosphate layer. Rinse thoroughly with clean water and allow to dry completely. Apply a top coat if desired for additional weather protection and aesthetics. The iron phosphate layer that results from this process is permanent. It will not chip, peel, or degrade in the way that paint degrades because it is not a coating applied to the surface, but a chemical transformation of the surface itself. Phosphoric acid, a few dollars per application, one treatment that converts your rust into a permanent protective layer and ends the cycle completely. They needed you to keep buying. Now you know you don't have to.